Welcome to our channel, History of Dark Souls. I want to tell you about the woman I killed. Her name was Elizabeth Morgan. She was 29 years old, a teacher, a mother of two beautiful children. I think about her every single day. I think about her children, about how they grew up without their mother. I think about her husband, about the hole I ripped in their lives, about the pain that never goes away. Nothing I do can ever fix that. Nothing. Snorts, there are moments in life when everything you believe in gets tested. When the rules you followed your whole career suddenly aren't enough. When doing the right thing means risking everything you've worked for. This is a story about one of those moments. A death row inmate had only days left to live. Everyone expected him to beg for mercy, to plead his innocence, to make one last desperate attempt to save his own life. But when he made his final request, the entire prison fell silent. What he asked for seemed impossible. It broke every rule in the book. But one correctional officer in Texas decided to risk everything to grant his wish. Her decision would shock the nation and change lives forever. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. Her name was Officer Rebecca Hayes. For 12 years, she'd walked the corridors of the Riverside Correctional Facility in Texas. And in those 12 years, she'd built a reputation that preceded her everywhere she went. Fair, firm, unbreakable. Rebecca was known for two things: her unwavering sense of justice and her absolute refusal to bend the rules for anyone. Not for the smooth-talking inmates who tried to charm her, not for the desperate ones who begged, not for anyone. Inmates respected her because she treated them like human beings. She looked them in the eye. She listened when they spoke. She never used her power to humiliate or degrade, but she never forgot what they'd done either. That was the line she walked every single day. Rebecca came from a family where justice wasn't just a word, it was a way of life. Her father had been a police officer for 30 years. Her older brother was a Texas Ranger. Law enforcement was in her blood, woven into the fabric of who she was. But so was compassion. She'd seen the worst of humanity behind those prison walls. Murderers, thieves, men who had destroyed families, shattered lives, left nothing but pain in their wake. Some showed remorse. Most did not. But Rebecca never let that darkness consume her own heart. She believed in the system. She believed that punishment had to exist for crimes to mean something. But she also believed deeply, fundamentally believed, that even the condemned deserved basic human dignity. That belief was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. It was a sweltering August morning when Rebecca first heard about Daniel Cole Matthews. The entire prison was buzzing with the news. Daniel was scheduled for execution in 72 hours, 3 days. That's all he had left. He'd been on death row for 17 years. 17 years of waiting. 17 years of appeals exhausted and denied. 17 years of knowing exactly how his story would end. Daniel had been convicted of a crime that shook the small town of Cypress Creek to its core. A home invasion that went horribly, tragically wrong. A young mother named Elizabeth Morgan had been killed in her own kitchen, her 2 children asleep upstairs. The evidence against Daniel had been overwhelming. His fingerprints were all over the scene. The stolen jewelry was found in his apartment. Multiple witnesses placed him near the house that night. Daniel never denied being there. From the moment of his arrest, he'd done something that shocked everyone. He confessed. Fully, completely. He pleaded guilty. He asked for no appeals. He simply waited to die. That was unusual. Most death row inmates fought until the very end. They filed motion after motion. They claimed new evidence, police misconduct, ineffective counsel, but not Daniel. Rebecca had worked with condemned prisoners before. She knew the routine. The final days were always the hardest. Not just for the inmate, but for everyone involved. The warden would come asking about final meal requests. Chaplains would visit daily, offering whatever comfort faith could provide. Family members would arrive for tearful last goodbyes. It was a grim, carefully choreographed dance toward death. But something about Daniel was different. Rebecca noticed it the moment she was assigned to his detail for the final 3 days. It was standard protocol. One officer would stay with the condemned prisoner around the clock to prevent suicide, to maintain order, to bear witness. When Rebecca introduced herself, keeping her voice professional and neutral, Daniel looked up from the worn Bible in his hands and smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile, not the grin of a madman or the smirk of someone in denial. It was warm, almost grateful. "Officer Hayes," he said softly, "thank you for being here." His politeness caught her completely off guard. Most inmates cursed the officers assigned to death watch. They were angry, terrified, lashing out at anyone within reach. Daniel seemed genuinely appreciative. Over the next day, Rebecca observed him carefully. She was trained to watch for signs of mental breakdown, for suicide attempts, for violence. But Daniel just prayed. He read letters over and over, his lips moving silently. He seemed to be preparing his soul for what was coming, making peace with something bigger than himself. She'd seen this before. Some men found God on death row. Whether it was genuine faith or desperate fear, she could never quite tell. But with Daniel, something felt different, authentic. There was a stillness about him that went deeper than resignation. On the second day, Daniel asked if he could speak with her, not as an inmate to a guard, but as one human being to another. Rebecca hesitated. She wasn't supposed to get personal. That was a line she'd never crossed in 12 years. But something in his eyes, something honest and raw, compelled her to listen. She pulled up a chair outside his cell, maintaining the proper distance, keeping her posture professional. "What do you want to say, Matthews?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Daniel took a deep breath. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the bars. "I want to tell you about the woman I killed," he said. "Her name was Elizabeth Morgan. She was 29 years old, a teacher, a mother of 2 beautiful children." Rebecca's jaw tightened. She knew the basic facts of the case, but she'd never heard Daniel speak about his victim. Most inmates avoided the topic entirely, built walls around it, distanced themselves from the horror of what they'd done. "I think about her every single day," Daniel continued, and his voice cracked like something breaking inside him. "I think about her children, about how they grew up without their mother. I think about her husband, about the hole I ripped in their lives, about the pain that never goes away." Tears began streaming down his face. "Nothing I do can ever fix that, nothing." Rebecca remained silent. She'd learned long ago not to offer comfort to the condemned. It wasn't her job. Her job was to maintain security, to keep order, to witness, nothing more. "I was high that night," Daniel said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Cocaine. I was completely out of my mind. I broke into that house looking for anything to steal, anything I could sell for my next hit." He paused, wiping his eyes with shaking hands. "She came downstairs. I panicked. I had a gun. I don't even remember pulling the trigger, but I did. And she died on her kitchen floor while I stood there and watched." Rebecca felt a familiar anger rising in her chest. This was why she believed in justice. This was why some crimes deserved the ultimate punishment. Elizabeth Morgan had done nothing wrong. She'd simply walked downstairs in her own home, and she died for it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Daniel said quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "I don't deserve it. What I did was evil, pure, inexcusable evil. I stole a mother from her bobbies. I destroyed a family. I know that. I've never denied that." "Then why are you telling me this?" Rebecca asked, her voice harder than she intended. She had no patience for self-pitying murderers. Remorse didn't bring back the dead. Tears didn't erase the crime. Daniel looked directly at her, and for the first time she saw something beyond grief in his eyes, purpose. "Because I want you to understand why I'm making the request I'm about to make," he said. "I need you to know that I understand the weight of what I've done, the magnitude of it. I need you to know this isn't about me." Rebecca leaned back slightly. This was it. The moment every death row inmate eventually reached. The bargaining, the desperate plea. The last-minute claim of innocence. "I don't have the authority to stop your execution," Rebecca said firmly. "If you're about to ask me to help you file an appeal, I can't do that. It's not my job, and I won't compromise my position." "That's not what I'm asking," Daniel interrupted. His voice was steady now, resolved. "I'm not asking you to save my life. My life should end. I accept that. I deserve that." Rebecca frowned. "Then what do you want?" She was genuinely confused. If he wasn't asking for mercy, what could he possibly want from her? Daniel reached under his thin mattress and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was worn and creased, as if he'd held it 1,000 times, folded and unfolded it in the dark hours of countless sleepless nights. He pressed it against the bars. I want you to deliver this letter, he said. After I'm gone, I want you to give it to Elizabeth Morgan's family, to her husband and her children personally. Rebecca stared at the envelope. Her mind raced. This was completely against protocol. Officers were not messengers. They did not interact with victims' families outside official channels. That was not how the system worked. There were rules, procedures, boundaries that existed for good reasons. I can't do that, Rebecca said immediately. You can mail it yourself. The prison allows final correspondence, you know that. I tried, Daniel said, and there was such sadness in his voice. I sent 3 letters to the Morgan family over the years. All 3 were returned unopened. They want nothing to do with me, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to hear from me either. He pushed the envelope further through the bars. But this letter is different, he said. It's not about me. It's not an apology or a plea for understanding. It's about something they need to know, something I should have told them 17 years ago. Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. What are you talking about? She asked carefully. Her instincts, honed over 12 years of dealing with inmates, told her this was about to become complicated, very complicated. Daniel's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The night I killed Elizabeth Morgan, I wasn't alone. There was someone else in that house, someone they never caught. Rebecca's eyes widened. For a moment she couldn't speak. What? She finally said, her voice sharp. Are you saying there was an accomplice? Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't this come up at trial? Because I was a coward, Daniel said simply. I took a plea deal. I didn't want to testify. I didn't want to drag it out. I just wanted it to be over, so I stayed silent. He gripped the bars tighter, his knuckles turning white. But that person is still out there, he said, and the Morgan family deserves to know the whole truth. They deserve to know that justice was only halfway served. Rebecca stood up abruptly. Her heart was pounding. If what Daniel was saying was true, this changed everything. This wasn't just a final wish, this was a confession, new evidence, a potential miscarriage of justice. You need to tell the warden, Rebecca said urgently. You need to tell the detectives who worked the case. If there's another person involved in this murder, they need to be caught. You can't just put this in a letter. I already tried, Daniel said, and his voice was heavy with defeat. I told my lawyer 2 years ago. He said that without physical evidence, it's just my word. No one believes a convicted killer trying to bargain at the last minute. He held up the envelope again. But this letter has details, he said. Names, descriptions, everything I remember. If the family has this information, maybe they can push for a new investigation. Maybe someone will finally listen. Rebecca paced back and forth in the small corridor. This was way above her pay grade. This was a legal nightmare, but she also knew how the system worked. Daniel was right. No one would listen to a death row inmate's claims now, not with hours left before execution. Why didn't you say something 17 years ago? Rebecca demanded. Why protect someone who helped you kill an innocent woman? That makes no sense. Daniel closed his eyes. Because I was afraid, he said. The other person threatened me, said if I talked, they'd kill my mother. I was a junkie and a coward, so I stayed quiet. I chose my mother's life over the truth. And now, Rebecca asked, she needed to understand his motivation. Was this genuine, or was this some elaborate manipulation, some last desperate attempt to delay his execution? My mother died 3 years ago, Daniel said quietly. Cancer. After she passed, I had no reason to stay silent anymore. But by then, I'd already given up on appeals. I'd accepted my death. He opened his eyes and looked at Rebecca with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. I'm going to die in 2 days, he said. I've made my peace with God, but I can't die with this secret. The Morgan family deserves the whole truth. They deserve to know that the person who planned the robbery, who gave me the address, who provided the gun, is still free, still living a normal life while their wife and mother is in the ground. Rebecca sat back down slowly. Her mind was spinning. Every fiber of her professional training told her to walk away, to report this to the warden, to let the system handle it through proper channels. But another part of her, the part that believed in true justice, knew that the system had already failed. If Daniel had tried to report this and been ignored, what good would reporting it again do? Even if I wanted to help you, Rebecca said carefully, I could lose my job. I could face legal consequences. Contacting Snort's victims' families outside official channels is strictly forbidden. I know, Daniel said. I'm not asking you to risk your career lightly. I'm asking because I've watched you these past 2 days. You're different from other officers. You actually care about what's right, not just what's legal, what's right. Rebecca felt torn. She'd built her entire career on following rules, on maintaining order, on being the kind of officer who never crossed lines. But this situation was unprecedented. "Let me read the letter first," she said finally. "If you're asking me to deliver it, I need to know exactly what it says. I need to know this isn't some cruel game or manipulation." Daniel nodded and slid the envelope through the slot. Rebecca opened it carefully. Inside were 3 handwritten pages. The handwriting snorts was shaky but legible, the writing of someone who'd poured everything into these words. She began to read. The letter started with a heartfelt apology. Daniel expressed remorse in raw, painful detail. He acknowledged the horror of what he'd done. He asked for nothing in return, made no excuses, offered no justifications. That part seemed genuine, but then the letter shifted. Daniel described the night of the murder in detail. He explained that his drug dealer, a man named Thomas Rivera, had planned the robbery. Thomas knew the Morgan family was wealthy. He'd worked in the neighborhood, done landscaping work, seen the house from the outside. Thomas had given Daniel the address. He provided the gun. He promised an easy score. Just grab some jewelry, some electronics, get out. But Thomas had stayed in the car while Daniel went inside. When everything went wrong, when Elizabeth Morgan ended up dead, Thomas fled. Daniel provided a detailed physical description of Thomas Rivera. Height, weight, distinguishing marks, a scar above his left eyebrow. He listed the neighborhood where Thomas had lived 17 years ago. He even included the name of the landscaping company Thomas had worked for. It was specific, detailed, credible. The letter ended with a plea. Daniel asked the Morgan family to take this information to the police, to push for a new investigation, to make sure that everyone responsible for Elizabeth's death faced justice. Rebecca folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. Her hands were trembling slightly. If this information was true, a murderer had walked free for 17 years. That was unacceptable. "Why should I believe you?" Rebecca asked. "You've been on death row for nearly 2 decades. You could be making this up. You could be trying to create chaos to hurt the family one last time." Daniel met her eyes. "Because I have nothing to gain," he said simply. "I'm going to die regardless. This doesn't help me. This doesn't save me. This isn't about me at all." He paused. "This is about them, about the Morgan family, and about the truth. I've lived with lies for 17 years. I don't want to die with them, even if no one believes me, even if nothing comes of this. I need to tell the truth." Rebecca stood up. She needed to think. She needed time. She needed to figure out what the right thing to do was, because right now the right thing and the legal thing were not the same. "I need 24 hours, she said. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll think about it. That's all I can offer right now." Daniel nodded gratefully. "Thank you," he said. "That's more than I deserve." That night Rebecca couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her small apartment, the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, the Texas heat pressing in through the windows. She kept thinking about Elizabeth Morgan, about her children growing up without a mother, about the possibility that justice was incomplete, that someone had escaped punishment. She thought about the rules she'd always followed, the code of conduct she'd sworn to uphold, the career she'd built on being trustworthy, reliable, by the book. But she also thought about a higher law, the moral law that said truth mattered, that justice mattered more than protocol, that sometimes, rarely, but sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. By morning, Rebecca had made her decision. It was reckless. It was against every regulation. It could end her career, but it was the right thing to do. She would deliver the letter. She would give the Morgan family the information. She would let them decide what to do with it. Rebecca returned to Daniel's cell at dawn. He was already awake, sitting on his bunk, staring at the wall. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "After your execution, I'll take the letter to the Morgan family. I'll deliver it personally. I'll make sure they get the information." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "You have no idea what this means. You're giving me the only redemption I'll ever have." Rebecca shook her head. "I'm not doing this for you," she said firmly. "I'm doing this for Elizabeth Morgan. I'm doing this because if there's even a chance that another person is responsible, her family deserves to know. They deserve complete justice." Daniel smiled through his tears. "I understand," he said, "and that's exactly why you're the right person to do this." The next day was Daniel's execution day. Rebecca stayed with him until the very end. He was calm. He prayed. He thanked her again, his voice steady despite everything. When they came to take him to the execution chamber, he walked with quiet dignity. No fighting, no screaming, no desperate last-minute pleas. Rebecca watched from the observation room as Daniel received the lethal injection. His final words were an apology to the Morgan family. He asked God for mercy, and then he was gone. The execution was over. Justice, according to the state of Texas, had been served. But Rebecca knew the story wasn't finished. She had a promise to keep. She had a letter to deliver. 3 days later, Rebecca drove to the small town of Cypress Creek. She'd done her research. She knew where Elizabeth Morgan's widower, James Morgan, still lived. He'd never remarried. He'd raised his 2 children alone, carrying his grief like a weight that never lessened. Rebecca's heart pounded as she knocked on the door. She was in civilian clothes. She'd taken a personal day from work. If anyone at the prison found out what she was doing, she would be fired immediately. The door opened. A man in his 50s stood there. His hair was more gray than brown. His face was lined with a grief that had never fully healed, etched into every feature. "Can I help you?" he asked politely but warily. "My name is Rebecca Hayes," she said. "I was the correctional officer assigned to Daniel Matthews during his final days. I have something for you, something he asked me to deliver." James Morgan's face hardened instantly. "I don't want anything from that man," he said coldly. "He killed my wife. He destroyed my family. I have nothing to say to him, and I want nothing from him." "I understand," Rebecca said gently, "and I almost didn't come, but this isn't about Daniel Matthews. This is about your wife, about Elizabeth. This is about the truth of what happened that night." James' expression shifted slightly, suspicion mixed with something else. Curiosity, fear. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "We know what happened. There was a trial," he confessed. "What truth is there left to know?" Rebecca held out the envelope. "Daniel said there was someone else involved," she said. "An accomplice, someone who was never caught. He provided details, names, descriptions, information that could lead to an arrest." James stared at the envelope like it might explode. "Why didn't he tell anyone this before?" he demanded. "Why wait until he was about to die? This sounds like a manipulation, like a game." "That's what I thought, too," Rebecca admitted. "I read the letter. The details are specific, credible, and Daniel had nothing to gain. He's already dead. This doesn't help him, but it might help you." James' hand shook as he took the envelope. He opened it slowly, carefully, as if it contained something fragile. Rebecca watched as his eyes scanned the pages. She saw anger flash across his face, then disbelief, then something else. Recognition. "Thomas Rivera," James whispered. His face went pale. "I know that name." Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. "Do?" she asked. "From where?" James looked up at her, his eyes wide. "He worked in our neighborhood," he said. "Landscaping." Elizabeth mentioned him several times, said he made her uncomfortable, always asking questions about our house, about our neighborhood, about when we'd be home and when we'd be away. His voice grew stronger, anger building. "I told her to report him," he said. "But she felt bad for him. She said he was just lonely, probably harmless. She was always too kind, too trusting." He gripped the letter tighter, his knuckles white. "If this man was involved," James said, his voice shaking with rage, "if he helped plan my wife's murder and walked free for 17 years, I will not rest until he's behind bars. I don't care what it takes. I don't care how long it takes." Rebecca nodded slowly. "That's what Daniel wanted," she said. "He knew the system wouldn't listen to him, but they might listen to you." James looked at Rebecca with new respect. "You risked your job to bring me this," he said. "Why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why did you do this?" Rebecca chose her words carefully. "Because I believe in real justice," she said. "Not just bureaucratic justice, not just checking boxes and following procedures. Real justice means the whole truth comes out. It means everyone responsible is held accountable." She paused. "Your wife deserves that. Your children deserve that. And I couldn't let protocol stand in the way of what was right, even if it costs me my career." James extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Truly, thank you. I promise you I will take this to the police. I will make them investigate. I will not let this go." Rebecca shook his hand. "That's all I ask," she said. Over the next 6 months, Rebecca followed the news closely. James Morgan had kept his word. He'd gone to the police with the letter. At first they were skeptical, understandably so. A death row confession, unverified claims, no physical evidence. But James was persistent. He hired a private investigator. He found old records from the landscaping company. He tracked down people who remembered Thomas Rivera. He pushed and refused to let anyone ignore him. Slowly, piece by piece, a case began to form. Thomas Rivera was located in New Mexico. He'd moved there years ago, changed jobs, tried to disappear, but not well enough. When police questioned him about the Morgan case, he initially denied everything. He claimed he'd never even heard of Elizabeth Morgan. But then, investigators found something remarkable. Hidden in a storage unit, buried under boxes of old clothes and forgotten belongings, Thomas had kept some of the items Daniel had stolen that night. He'd been too sentimental, or too stupid, or perhaps too arrogant to believe he'd ever be caught. DNA testing on the jewelry matched samples from the Morgan home. Fingerprints matched Thomas' records from an old arrest. The case against him was solid. He was arrested and charged with felony murder. The trial made national news. The story of Daniel Matthews' deathbed confession. The brave officer who broke the rules to deliver the truth. The grieving family who finally got complete justice. Rebecca was called to testify. She explained what Daniel had told her. She admitted that she'd violated prison protocol. She faced potential disciplinary action. But the jury was moved by her courage, by her commitment to truth over convenience. Thomas Rivera was convicted. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. James Morgan stood in the courtroom and wept. Not tears of joy, because nothing about this situation was joyful, but tears of relief. His wife's murder was finally fully answered. After the trial, James held a press conference. He thanked Rebecca publicly. He called her a hero. He said she represented the best of what law enforcement could be, courage over comfort, truth over protocol. But Rebecca did face consequences. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice launched an investigation into her actions. She was suspended for 2 months without pay. She was formally reprimanded. Some officials said she should have been fired outright, but public opinion was strongly in her favor. Thousands of people signed petitions supporting her. News outlets ran stories about the officer who chose justice over rules. She became a symbol. In the end, Rebecca kept her job. She was reinstated with conditions. She had to undergo additional training. She had to accept a transfer to a different facility, but she was allowed to continue serving. Her career survived. More importantly, her conscience was clear. She had done the right thing. She had honored Daniel Matthews' final wish, not for his sake, but for the sake of truth, for the sake of Elizabeth Morgan's memory. James Morgan used settlement money from Thomas Rivera's civil trial to create something meaningful, the Elizabeth Morgan Justice Foundation. It helped families of murder victims access private investigators and legal resources when they felt the system had failed them. Rebecca was asked to serve on the board. She accepted. She found a new purpose. She realized that justice was bigger than any one institution, any one set of rules. It required good people willing to take risks, willing to stand up when it was hard. Daniel Matthews died believing he could make one thing right in a life full of wrongs. His confession led to the arrest of a man who had evaded justice for 17 years. It brought closure to a grieving family, and it revealed something profound about Officer Rebecca Hayes. She wasn't just a rule follower. She was a woman of principle. She understood that sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Sometimes justice requires courage. Sometimes it requires individuals to step outside their roles, to take risks, to fight for what's right, even when the system says no, even when it threatens your career, even when it would be so much easier to just look away. Their story reminds us that true justice isn't just about following rules. It's about following truth. It's about ensuring that every victim's story is fully told, that every perpetrator is held accountable, that every family gets closure. Rebecca Hayes could have said no. She could have played it safe. She could have let Daniel Matthews' confession die with him, but she chose courage. She chose truth. She chose justice. And in doing so, she proved that one person really can make a difference. One person really can change the outcome. One person's courage can heal wounds that have festered for years. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Remember, true justice requires us to be brave. It requires us to stand up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because in the end, we're judged not by the rules we followed, but by the courage we showed when the rules weren't enough, by the times we chose what was right over what was easy. Share this video if you believe in second chances and complete justice. Hit subscribe for more true stories of courage, redemption, and the power of doing what's right. And tell me in the comments, would you have done what Officer Hayes did? Would you have risked everything to deliver that letter? Let me know. Your opinion matters. Thank you for watching. Remember to be kind to one another and never stop fighting for what's right.